What's up, my friends? It's Andy. This is Epeius Garage, and I got an interesting project today. One of my loyal customers, Vicky, asked if I would frame her odd-sized diamond painting. If you're not familiar what a diamond painting is, it's pretty cool. It's kind of like paint by numbers, but thousands of little tiny diamonds that you got to place in the right area to get a cool image. Anyways, it's an odd size, and she wanted something nice to display it. In my head, I'm thinking of floating frame. Black is what her and I kind of agreed on. I think that would really make these vibrant colors pop. So my head, what I'm thinking, if you watch my channel, I don't hardly ever draw anything out. I'm thinking of floating frame, maybe a 1/4-inch gap between the art and the frame. It'll be kind of lifted, so it'll look like it's floating in the frame. The frame is going to be made out of high quality pine from the big box store. 1/4-inch dowel. I'll end up using this because you always need to reinforce your miter joints. I think I'm going to use dowel for this one because it's going to be a thin frame. You'll see. And I got some backing board. It's 1/4-inch plywood. That's going to be the backing for this and the backing of the frame that it'll go to. I'm trying to keep it light. So that's kind of the plan here. I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. I think it's really going to be cool. As far as the coloring, I'm going to use black spray paint for the actual background or around the frame that you'll see. And then for the actual frame, I'm going to use a black stain. I've never used black stain, so I'm kind of curious about that. But anyways, let's get to it. And if you like it, I really appreciate the likes and the comments. And if you have any questions or anything, and check out some of my other videos, you might find those interesting as well. All right, let's get to it. Let's see if I can explain this and if you can hear me over my heater. To make sure you have the gap around your art piece, you need to add to the length of your miters whatever that gap is going to be. In this case, I want a 1/4-inch all the way around my art. Therefore, I had to add a 1/2 inch to each piece from inner to inner, because this is your art is going to be in here. So you have to make sure you add whatever that gap is going to be. First thing, cut my pieces to length. Then adjust my table saw for some rip cuts, and I'm gonna rip this board down to the width that I want. This width will actually be the height of the frame. And for the miter joints, I use a stop block because it's important. They're all these pieces are exactly the same size, so your frame is square. I'm gonna use my marker to mark the width of my rabbit. I got to make rabbits for the backing of the frame. I'm going to use my dado stack to make the rabbits. So I just wanted to explain this the best I can. So using a marker, I marked it 7/16. I want the backing to come into the wood on the back 7/16 to leave room for screws, because I'm going to screw this backing in because it's got to be really secure. So the height of the dado stack is going to be how far in the board it's coming, and the width of the dado stack is going to be how thick my backing is going to be, which in this case it's going to be a little less than 1/4 inch on that plywood. So supposedly with both of these blades together, you get a 1/4 inch. Find that to be false. Probably the plywood is not a 1/4 inch exactly. No, it's 3/16. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but that's a pretty big difference. So I may just use one. That is pretty close. You know what? I realized it doesn't even matter how deep it is. If it's a little bit deeper than the thickness of the board, that's fine. I'm just going to have to adjust my spacer, because at the end of the day, we want this artwork to be even with the frame. So the spacer is going to have to take up that space. So I'll just have to change the spacer. Not a big deal. Change my blade to the dado stack and then adjust the height to my marked line. Now I was worried about going too deep. It's easy to adjust here instead of going all the way to the edge. I'll leave about a 1/16. I run the board through and then I do a little test fit up, run it through, test fit up, run it through until I get the perfect depth that I'm wanting. Once I'm good, then I'll run the rest of the boards through and I double check them before I'm done to make sure that all the heights and everything are good. Sometimes you put a little bit too much pressure or it's not exactly up against your fence. The datas may not be exactly what you want, so double check. About to use my strap clamp. Y'all, if y'all don't have one, get one. I link it in my description on all my videos, but it'll make your life a lot easier. I am doing my test fit up here. I want to test for squareness. I want to make sure my rabbets are going to work. I want to make sure that all the links are correct and my miters look good. This is important before you glue it up to check this. And you'll see why. Well, I always show you all the good, the bad, and the ugly. So here's the ugly. Somehow I made my shorter boards a 1/4 inch too small. So right now they're measuring at 27 1/4 and they were supposed to measure 27 1/2. The long way I got right on the money, 36 5/8, which leaves me a 1/4 inch on the top and bottom. So I got to cut 2 new pieces. I don't know how I did this. I measured like 2 times. They say measure twice, cut once. That's bull crap. Got the old board out, cut the new board, put it in, and it was right on the money. Took me about 15-20 minutes, but I'm back on track. Now I can glue it up. Using Titebond 2, I glued the top and bottom miters, cinched it down, and let it dry for a couple hours. Before the miter joints were even dry, I was able to still get my measurements for the plywood. This way, while this was drying, I could start cutting my plywood. I did a video on this method. You don't need a track saw or anything to cut these big sheets of plywood, just a straight edge and some basic squares. Check it out. I'll link it. Once I got those down to manageable sizes, then I could put on my table saw, square them up, make sure everything was good. Took it over there to the frame that's still drying and just did a test fit up, make sure everything was gonna fit well. And it fit great, actually really tight fit. I had to go around with my little rubber mallet, get it all fit in. Now, this is not dry yet, the frame, but I'm screwing this all in, so it's gonna hold the frame together as well. Tight like a tiger. And this is why I had to have that rabbet wide enough so I could put screws. And I just evenly put these screws around. I think I maybe used a total of 12 screws. I can't remember. Honestly, these dowels after putting that backing on are probably not really necessary, but I like doing it in case anybody ever takes the backing off or whatever. I want the frame to be as sturdy as all my frames always are. Quick sanding with 80 grit, not the final sand. I wanted to add a little profile to the edge of this, nothing crazy, so I put in my 45-degree beveling, whatever you want to call it, and router bit, and just went around it with my trim router, putting on that 45-degree edge. Now, like I said at the beginning, I'm going to use spray paint on the inside of this, so the inside edges and the background is going to be spray painted black. So I didn't want spray paint on the outside because I'm going to use that stain. So I went ahead and taped off around the front just to try to avoid some of the spray paint getting on the rest of the wood. This next step was a little nerve-wracking, I ain't gonna lie. I had to cut the edge, the excess off around the artwork, and I didn't want to screw it up. I thought a razor knife was gonna work, but it turns out scissors work best, and honestly, Vicky mentioned that to me whenever she handed it to me, and that's what I ended up using as scissors. Once I had that all cut out, all the excess off of it, I was able to get my final plywood measurements, which will be the same size as this artwork. And after that, y'all, it's the exact same process. I cut down the plywood to fit this artwork. After getting the art backing piece fit up just perfectly, I went ahead and put a bevel on the back of the backing. This will give more of an impression of it floating. And to make things even better, I went ahead and spray painted that edge so there's no chance of seeing any white or giving away my illusion. Now that the paint has dried, I would remove the tape and it was time to use the black stain. Black stain was very interesting, went on very well. It was a lot darker than I thought it would be, but you could still see the wood grain, which is also what I wanted. So I was very happy with how the wood stain turned out. Don't have my mic on. Hopefully y'all can hear me. If not, I'll voice it over. So I want to talk about spacers. These are 1 inch. These are what are going to go between the art, the board, the backing board, and the art. They'll actually be under here. I am putting them here so I can mark where to drill my holes. Then I can transfer that and drill the holes onto the actual frame. I really hope I'm explaining this well. I'm just drilling the holes now, and the spacers are going to go between this and the very backing board that we already applied to the frame, and that's what's going to give the floating effect. So all I'm doing right now is applying those spacers that will give the frame its distance, and that distance I calculated it to where it was going to be even with the outside of the frame. Once you get your floating spacers all set, you can set it in your frame. And I use some shims. I like using these because I can set them all the way around and get everything exactly the same distance. These shims, I always link them in my description. Feel free to check them out. But I use them in all kinds of applications. And this was the best way for me to make sure I get the same distance all the way around between the artwork and the frame. Of course, once I had my spacing correct, I went ahead and screwed it all down, and now it is fully attached to the frame. The customer actually left me a spray adhesive. She said it worked really well. I used it. The best way for the spray adhesive is spray a layer on each side, let them dry, and then place them down. It's contact cement, and once it contacts with each other, it's like a permanent bond. Artwork is secure. I'm gonna set it back in the frame, square it back up to my pre-drilled holes, and then from the back of this, I'm gonna screw it into those spacers. And that is what's gonna secure it to the frame while keeping the space all around it. Once I'm done with that, I am going to flip it over, and I'm gonna use wire framing hardware for this. Basically 2 D-rings and some framing wire, and you run it across, and you can do it a lot of different ways. I use this method a lot. Customer Vicky, she loved it. I loved it. I think it made this piece really pop, and I appreciate y'all watching. I will see y'all next time.